The next text structure that we will examine is what is known as sequence. Sequencing is used to inform about certain topics by presenting the information in a specific order. Hence the term sequence. Typically these are used for a series of instructions or perhaps even steps within a process. So the purpose of using sequencing is to provide information based on chronological events. So we may see this in a story that will be something along the lines of this happened, and then this happened, and then finally that happened. Next, an author could use it to provide a list of sequential instructions. So step 1, step 2, step 3, or maybe something like first you will do this, then do this, and then finally do that. Lastly, authors will use sequencing to present arguments that use evidence to support a claim. And the type of sequencing that we see used in this case is what is known as order of degree. And perhaps the author is presenting information from most important to least important. You may even hear this particular type of sequencing used as order of importance. So over the course of this lesson, we are going to be looking at each of these three most common types of sequencing. And we will begin with our first one, chronological order. Sequencing in chronological order means that it's organized by the time order in which the events happened. We would refer to this as maybe a sequence of events, or if you think about in your history textbook, seeing things listed on a timeline. This type of information is presented in the specific order in which it occurred in time. As a matter of fact, that's when we look at the root of chronological. The part of the word chrono means time, and the latter part, logic, means order. Some signal words that will let us know that we are seeing something that is presented in a chronological sequence would be words like first, next, before, after, then, or finally. As soon as Lupe got her diploma, she started looking for a better job. She was tired of scrubbing other people's floors. First, she went to career counseling at a local college. The counselor helped her figure out what she wanted to do. It turned out that her hobby, making wreaths out of dried flowers, could become a job. Second, the counselor helped Lupe create a resume and make a list of companies within 30 miles of her town. That might be interested in hiring her. Next, Lupe took photos of some of her best craft projects and sent copies to the 5 companies she liked best. She included her resume and a cover letter. 2 of the companies called her in for interviews the following week. One was a florist, Meg Brown. Meg asked if Lupe could make dried flower baskets and other crafts. Lupe said yes, and finally, she was hired. All right, let's see if we can identify some of the signal words in this passage. So as soon as Lupe got her diploma, she started looking for a job. She was tired of scrubbing other people's floors. First, okay, so there is a signal word that lets us know what happened first. So she went to career counseling. Counselor helped her figure out what she wanted to do. It turned out, so turned out is another signal word that clues us to the next event that happens in chronological order. Making wreaths out of dried flowers could become a job. Second, the counselor helped anybody create a resume. And then next, and then finally, she was hired. One other one that also signals to us another event that takes place in chronological order is the following week. Okay, so we see that here. She was called in for interviews the following week. So if we're going to just briefly describe what happens in this story in chronological order, we can use these signal words to help us narrow down specifically the key points that we need to bring out. So the next type of sequencing that we will discuss is what is known as sequential order. This is a type of sequence that is organized by the order in which a process or a sequence occurs. So typically, sequential order is going to refer to steps in a process. We usually see these in instruction manuals where we're given a list of instructions on things to do or directions on how to do something. We also will see sequential order used when the author is explaining a process in nature or in society as well. Now, it's easy to confuse chronological order and sequential order, so there's a couple of things that we can do to help differentiate. Whenever something is presented in a chronological sequence, these events occur in a specific time and or place. With sequential sequencing, they're not tied to a specific time or place. Some signal words that will help us determine that, hey, this is a sequential sequence will be first, next, before, lastly, then. Again, by no means an exhaustive list. And as you noticed, some of them are still similar to chronological. So don't let the signal words cause confusion as well. Best example for a sequential type of order would be a recipe. And what better recipe to look at than chocolate chip cookies? Because who does not like chocolate chip cookies? I love chocolate chip cookies, just can't really have them, unfortunately. But here we see on the left-hand side we have a list of ingredients, but what we want to pay attention to is this right-hand side. So the right-hand side gives us the directions. So as you see, we have several steps on how to make what this particular author called the perfect chocolate chip cookie recipe. And by the way, this is a real recipe if you decide that you want to eat some chocolate chip cookies while you work on your assignments for this lesson. So the process begins with preheating the oven to 375 degrees. Next step is in a separate bowl, you're going to mix your flour, baking soda, salt, baking powder, and then set it aside. And then it goes through each step of the process. Recipes are probably one of the most common things that you will encounter that is presented in sequential order. Items that are put in a sequence by degree means that they are organized by order of priority based on a hierarchy of value. As I said earlier, it could be referred to as order of importance. Typically, they are going to be arranged or ranked in a way that actually suits the topic. One thing to remember with order of degree is mostly it is going to be subjective to the author's perspective, purpose, topic, and goal. An example of that is if an author starts with the most important item, it's done to hook your attention. But if the author is starting with the least important item, usually that means that he or she is going to try to persuade you towards their opinion on the topic. Once again, order of degree can be confused with sequential order, but there is a subtle difference. We have to ask ourselves, is it a process? So remember, the order of degree is ranked by the author's interpretation of importance and is not listed as steps in a process. Possible rankings could be from most to least important, from least to most useful, from most to least familiar, maybe even from simplest to most complex, or from oldest to youngest, from biggest to smallest. It's going to depend on the topic and the author's purpose for writing the topic. Some common transitional words that we will see that clue us in that this is an order of degree type of sequence would be first, second, mainly, also, furthermore, finally, and ultimately. So let's look at a passage and try to identify some of the transition words that clue us in that this is an order of degree type of sequencing. Linda and Hader have 4 children. First, there is Tanisha, who is 20 years old. She is studying business administration. Next is George. He is 18 and on his high school basketball team. Yvette is 15 and a talented artist. Finally, the baby of the family is Jimmy. He is 10 and all he cares about is soccer. All right, so let's see if we can identify some of these transitional words. Okay, so we have first, there's Tanisha. She's 20 years old, studying business. Next is George. He's 18. So let's pay attention to this. 20 years old. He's 18. Yvette is 15. Finally, the baby of the family is Jimmy. So we mentioned the baby. He is 10, and all he cares about is soccer. So let's think for a moment. How is this organized? If we think in terms of order of degree, they begin with Tanisha, who's 20. Next, George, who's 18. Yvette is 15. And then finally, Jimmy, the baby, is 10. All right, so we have 20, 18, 15, and 10. In this case, we are going from oldest to youngest, which is a common way to sequence the people when you are talking about your family. You're going to tend to, if you're, say for example, talking about your children, describe them from oldest to youngest. Now, some other ways that they could have done it is going from youngest to oldest. They could have started with Jimmy and worked their way up to Tanisha. They could have done it based on interest. So in this case, we see that George is on the basketball team and Jimmy likes playing soccer. So they could put the athletes together. They could have done it by gender. So there's different ways that it could have been sequenced.